Well, good morning to all of you. This is not a bad place to come in out of the rain. Whether you're here for what we're going to discuss or not. So I have to ask you all first a question. And your answer will not will not be a problem, and nothing will change. How many of you have studied the 7-point mind training? That's too many. Half of you will have to leave. We'll draw straws. Where's Linda?
Oh, he's just here.
Would you like your book?
My book?
Linda Grove. Oh, she's making some extra copies.
She's busy.
So while we wait for that, we can hand out the 25 or 30 copies that I made. Now the paper that I'm giving you is a direct kind of fair use copy of it, right out of the book, for the most part. A kind of chunk, since our work today will cover a fairly small section of the mind training. Well, if we were to cover the whole thing today in 3 hours, I think that would be a problem.
Whiplash.
Excuse me, are they supposed to be in duplicate?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Are the 2 pages supposed to be different?
Oh, you know, there was some printing problems last night around 12:01, and some of the pages may have not printed right. There's three logical pages, 1, 2, and 3, but they didn't all come out. Anyway, Linda is printing more of them downstairs, so we'll get those in a minute.
So I have one and one.
One and two twice.
You have 1 and 2?
Twice.
Yeah, I have one and
1
one.
and 2 twice?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you need.
Yeah, get satisfied.
What's the name of the
That's what we're using.
Essential Mind Training. Oh, Essential Mind Training. These are from the book we're currently using in the mind training group.
2011.
Essential Mind Training by Thupten Jinpa, as it says on the top of this.
Oh, it says it right there.
So, oh, there she is.
How many more are needed up here? One,
2, I think.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
This 4?
Your job was to discourage it.
Good. I was so surprised at it. I was like, what? Nobody listens to me. I see how it is now. Easy come, easy go. Actually, I've been waiting to get fired. Ruby!
There's no page 4. They're all blank. There is no page 4? That's emptiness.
There's no page 4.
Oh boy, this is trouble now. You got a wild gang.
There's no page 4 except for those pages which got a page 4 on it due to the little printing thing. If you find something interesting on page 4, consider yourself lucky.
All that you need to know is
All you need to know. Right there, the lunch break.
Beyond concept.
All right.
That's the ultimate part right there.
So generally, my intention with the pages that you have, and you should have 1, 2, and 3 on 2 pieces of paper. And Linda, thank you, wherever you are. Thank you for that emergency printing. So my second question, which will be helpful maybe for you and for me also, is there anyone here who has not studied the mind training at all? Okay. No one, so that's good. So my intention in lifting out of the Thupten Jinpa's text was to provide a short synopsis of a piece of the mind training. A piece which I think those who have studied it would probably say is not much attention is given to the ultimate aspects in most of the mind training books and in most of the teachings. Even those things which appear to us as ultimate are in most cases actually relative aspects. And generally speaking, it is, I think, common in this tradition, and certainly insofar as we receive our instructions from Tibetan Lamas, that the emphasis is placed quite heavily on experience. And the explanation of the underlying meaning and the kind of, you might say, the technology of the meditation is generally left for much later, if ever. And the if ever doesn't really mean anything other than if you can find it, great. It's not like it's necessarily secret in a hidden place. It's secret in like out sitting in the middle of the room, but we can't see it. So as we sometimes say, hidden out in the open. And the mind training definitely has some aspects of that. Some of us, I think it's helpful to acknowledge that we are not all the same. And that the way that we absorb and work with practices in the mind training are different for every person, at least to some degree. Some of us work better with a highly experiential approach without needing too much explanation. And some work better with a more conceptual approach as a starter, and then gradually, with a little help, the experience comes. So my intention was to follow Thupten Jinpa's words today along the lines of a conceptual approach followed by an experiential approach. So first an understanding, and since you've studied the mind training, then the understanding of it conceptually, hopefully, is pretty good. The actual, really deeply useful understanding has to be experiential. So no question about that. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to take these 3 pages that I legitimately lifted out of Thupten Jinpa's text. I have my fair use lawyer here. So, on the pages, you see on the first page at the top, not the very top, but just below where it says first train in the preliminaries, I want to cover that just a little bit. In the tradition of mind training, as in many of the other Buddhist practices, especially in the Vajrayana, but also in the Mahayana, we rely heavily upon instructions that at least originate from someone who we have confidence in, someone who apparently understands it and has practiced it and manifests it in some way, so we feel some confidence. That confidence is critical. And many great teachers have said, no confidence, there's no path. The confidence is critical. Some have even gone so far as to say the person you're studying with could be not qualified. But if your confidence and your connection with the things are enough, it'll still bear its fruit. So on the top left side of the first page, it says first train in the preliminaries. Generally speaking, we can say that this is the most important few words in the text, even though those of you who have engaged in the preliminaries over and over are tired of it. Me too. So I'm going to treat this kind of as a running commentary on Thupten Jinpa's thing, Thupten Jinpa's writing. And we'll skip a few places along the way. I wanted it to be a kind of coherent whole, not to chop it up too much from taking it out of the text directly. So he says, first train in the preliminaries. What are the preliminaries? The practitioner of this mind training must be someone who, by relying on a qualified teacher, whose lineage stems from a Tisha, has trained his or her mind in the three scopes in systematic order and has thus reached a certain level. Now, some of you may not remember what the scopes are, so I just want to bring those up because what they point to is not necessarily obvious. The three scopes. The three scopes have to do with our underlying energy in our own minds for how we approach the practices. Why do you do this practice? Why do you care? Why do you come today and spend time here? Why not be out sunbathing or something like that? If you do not appreciate the fact that you were born a human being instead of the uncountable other options, then you're not, if you do not appreciate this fact, that you were born a human being with a body which is more or less healthy most of the time, and physical makeup which allows you to learn to read, to speak the language, to engage in the practices and learn them. It's not enough to just appreciate it in this life. It's important that we have an appreciation that we have this life, first of all, and that by virtue of that, we have many opportunities that otherwise would not be here. Now, there's a problem here right off that many of us will have, and that is that we don't appreciate it. And we don't appreciate it for really good reasons. They're cultural reasons, but they're good reasons. We do not generally, in this culture, carry the view that we could have been born as something else. A tortoise, a fish, a human with not a very good body or a good brain and a mind that can learn things. Or perhaps our parents sold us into slavery or some other really bad thing. There are so many things that could have gone wrong along the way that somehow either they didn't go wrong or we managed to overcome them. One of our reasonable issues is that we have the view that our existence, if you will, began with our conception and our birth, and that when this body comes to an end, that's the end also. And so our entire existence is kind of proscribed by this relatively short period of less than a century for most of us. That view will stop us from actually properly, fruitfully embracing the practices and experiencing the fruit of the practice. So if you're one of those people who feels like, I don't quite get this, I can't quite believe this, as one of my friends once said, there's no evidence for it. My favorite response was, what's your evidence for the other side? The truth is, I think, as good scientists, we can't find evidence on either side really very well. So what are we going to do about that? If we want to go deep into the practice, it's essential, right in this very first point, train in the preliminaries, to hold the unbounded view. The unbounded view runs kind of in summary like this. We actually don't have a beginning. So looking for a beginning is not very fruitful. And likewise, we don't have an end. The body has a beginning. That's true. We all know that, and it has an end. But if that's the whole game, then you really shouldn't be here. You're wasting your time. So the issue is, how do we get into the practice? The door can look too small if I have to believe something that I just can't quite stomach. So one way that we can overcome this is, we do hold a view, and the view is that life has a beginning and an end. And our existence as a human being has a beginning and an end. And that, I think, for most of us, in the beginning, is a belief, or was a belief, if you've If it's not a belief for you, you've worked on it and gone past that thing. But generally speaking, in our culture, this is a belief. So if we could abandon the belief, we'd be in fresh territory where something new could happen that didn't happen before. And the new could be the view of unboundedness, no boundaries, no lines drawn around the extent of our life. For that matter, if we're happy or unhappy, no lines drawn around happiness and unhappiness. Like, it's all unbounded. So when it's unbounded, then we can, put aside the belief and just hold the view. The view is kind of like a lens through which you look at something. You can look at the moon on a night when the moon is very bright, and you can know something about it. But if you have a good telescope, you can know a lot more. So a view is kind of like a telescope. We can look at our sense of who we are. We can look at the teachings. We can look at so many things from the perspective of no boundaries, no beginning, no end. You've all heard the phrase, unborn, undying, which is a common phrase that we use to designate some of the more open, advanced, if you want, teachings. Unborn, undying. So here we are not talking about something which never came into existence or hasn't come into existence yet. We're actually talking about something that's a little different than that when we say unborn, undying. Like it never existed in the way that we ordinarily talk about things as existing. Okay, now you're going to hold that perfectly. And continually remind yourself for these 3 hours today, and we'll take a break in there. At least that we would aspire and like to hold a view which allows us to see things and understand things that we cannot see or understand without that view. So, the practitioner of this mind training must be someone who, by relying on a qualified teacher whose lineage stems from a Tisha, it's always the case. Every teaching that we have must be traced to some origin, somewhere. Even the great teachers will trace their teachings back. Even those who we say are fully enlightened will say, no, I'm not, this came from this source. It's me. That keeps us safe from self-aggrandizement. It's a protection. Okay, so Atisha, from Atisha, has trained his or her mind in the 3 scopes. So the first scope is that we are, I love this one. We're terrified of being reborn in an unfortunate circumstance. Now, most of us, you see, can't experience that terror because we actually don't believe it anyway. So here we are again. The view is fragile for us. We must continually nurture it, remind ourselves of it, look at it again and again. But if you had grown up in a culture where it was taken for granted that you're born, you live a life, whatever your body is, you live a life, you die, and then you have a period in between those lives, and then you have another birth, and so on, and it's just this cyclic existence just keeps going and going and going. And of course, every time we think, this is it, this is it, this is it. It's like, but we are not cognizant of all the in-between pieces. So for now, it's kind of, think of it like this. You saw the moon was cool, but then someone gave you a telescope and you looked through it. And then you gave it back. And then all you had was this kind of dull memory of what it was. Wow, that was really amazing. All those things on the moon, I didn't know that it looked like that. Or you could look at something else in the same way. So here we need to just keep reminding ourselves of that. 3 scopes. The first one is fear. Fear of unfortunate rebirth. You can put aside the issue of rebirth on this particular one and just go with the fear. Just go with the fear. So we could say the first scope is fear. Fear of what? Well, we could all make a list with 100 things pretty fast. Fear of sickness, fear of being murdered, fear of bad dreams tonight, fear of somebody you love and care about, you lose them, they die, they leave you, they reject you, like all these things. Fear. It's critical that we get in touch with that fear as the first scope. So we could look at it and just say, no, I don't have that fear. I'm not afraid of an unfortunate rebirth because I actually don't believe in it. We have to find our place in the 3 scopes and work with it one by one, is the instruction from Thupten Jinpa. You must work with it one by one. So if you look at the unfortunate rebirth and say, I'm not afraid of that, then you need to stop and say, why would I be afraid of that? You need to work on that so that we have a sense of, wow, if it really is unbounded, is there anything I can do about it? We need to come to that place. Is there anything I can do about it? Because if I can't do anything about it, then why are we sitting here? But if you could do something about it, then you would want to take those steps. And in essence, that's what the whole 7-point mind training is about. But in order to harness that, we need to do a few other prerequisites. Trained his mind in the 3 scopes. Scope 2. Scope 2 is Scope 2 is when we recognize that really bad circumstances, and especially our own pain and suffering, mental, physical, well, the physical is just what spawns the mental, however you want to see that, but mental and physical, our own pain and suffering don't come from outside. They don't come from outside for one very important reason. I mean, let's call it a rationalization. There is one good argument why they don't come from outside. Because every happiness, every pleasure, every pain, every last thing that we experience it in the mind. Not in the big toe, not in your shoe, not in any other place. It is in the mind. And since I think we could agree that we're talking about our mind, not someone else's mind, or not some mind that somebody replaced with our other mind, we are in essence in complete mastery of that situation. If we aren't, it's just because we don't have the tools. Or we have the tools, but we haven't worked them enough to get the result. Or, as the old Kala Rinpoche used to say, if you said, my life is filled with suffering, he would say, it's the Buddha's blessing. So, on a number of occasions, he said, to individuals, you have not suffered enough. It sounds kind of sadistic, doesn't it? I have a room here, I can make you suffer, and you'll see. The problem is that we have to see that the suffering comes from our own mind, not from someone else's mind. So we have to see that the confusion that we call samsara, which we often mistakenly identify as a geographical location, like Portland. When we're unhappy, we say, Portland is samsara. But you should go to Los Angeles. That is really samsara. Try Las Vegas, maybe. So we have this sense that the suffering is somehow manifesting outside and we're being affected by it. So that's the second scope, is the sense of I have suffered enough in samsara. We haven't yet said I have been samsaric enough such that we haven't gone quite there yet. Suffered enough that I see the problem. I don't see the solution yet, but I see the problem. The problem is not what's going on outside of me. There might be a lot of problems outside me, and in this world we can find lots of problems, but what is the problem exactly? So as a kind of generic answer to that, we would say it's confusion. It's confusion every time. It's confusion. It's not that people are bad and people are good and all. It's that both the bad people and the good people are confused. So we end up doing things inadvertently that hurt ourselves. Then we have to blame somebody else. Then we have to figure out it's not them. It's like all of this back and forth. So the second scope is about an aversion to samsara. Not an aversion to this world of crazy people, an aversion to samsara. Because samsara does not exist separate from our own mind and all of these people's minds. It's the same. Okay, we're gonna stop at that scope for now. Practitioner, having generated, okay, now we're at this place. We have the three scopes. The three scopes, what's important about the three scopes is, if you don't relate to it yet, which is like easy to understand, I can say personally, from my own side, this was a decade to just like fake relating to it. It's not necessarily easy. And some people work with some things easier and other people not so easy with some things. And it's not necessary to engage in all the practices anyway, because the truth is that any piece of the 7-point mind training, for example, can be the seed from which we understand the entire path. So it's not necessary to actually get everything, but it's necessary to plant seeds over and over and over again. So, the practitioner, having generated, I won't say again the 3 scopes, systematic order, you go through them one by one until you value your human existence, until you appreciate that you got that, until you have a sense that if it's this good, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to ignore it. I want to continue to nurture it. And along the way, looking at the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, which you're all clear about, you land on that square called karma, which is really just the truth of interdependence manifesting. So it shouldn't be so difficult to understand that what we put in our minds is what we get back out again. We are all today filled with habitual patterns for thinking, habitual patterns of actions, habitual patterns of all kinds. And as Dharma practitioners, we should be able to look at all of that and have this very clear understanding. This is the result of just doing these things over and over and over again. It's how we do everything. We go to school, we learn, we memorize. First we memorize, then we start to get meanings and all. But we're just repeating all the time. And at some point, we start having this sense of personal identity. I am this thing, I am this thing, I am this thing. And if we're lucky, somebody encouraged us to think we're worthy. And if we're unlucky, somebody encouraged us to think we're not worthy. And so we may have a harder time or a better time. But it's all about the garden of all those seeds, just constantly manifesting. The Dharma is about noticing those habitual patterns and how they've come about. And when they come about, it would be natural for everyone to have this sense, I would like to do something about that. I don't like who I think I am. For example, I don't feel empowered. It's just ordinary stuff in a certain way. I'd like to do something about it. The entire Dharma path is about doing something about that. The problem is, we might not like it, but we don't yet know what would be good. And so, we're as likely to make it worse as we are to make it better. Which is why, once again, even though we may not be able to relate to the 4 thoughts as they are, it's really important for us to get well grounded in it so that we do relate to it, because if you're going to practice the Dharma in a fruitful way, which will bring about your benefit and the benefit of others, you must be able to relate to those 4 thoughts that turn the mind. Even if you only hold it as a view. In fact, I would say best if you only hold it as a view. It's a personal thing I think I have. I don't like belief. Belief concretizes things, and just in case that was the wrong thing to believe, now you're in deeper. So better just hold the view. Look through the telescope. You don't actually have to believe that you see the moon. Somebody could have put a big picture out there, and you wouldn't know the difference. But the experience counts. Okay, so the practitioner, having generated, now he comes to. Tupta Jinpa does this occasionally. It's not always exactly clear where he is. If you look in the book carefully, three scopes, systematic order, and have thus reached a certain level. The practitioner, having generated the 2 awakening minds, aspiring and engaging, cognizant of including even the tiniest precepts of these practices, these are the prerequisites. We'll come back to this. The aspiring mind, the awakening mind, the bodhicitta mind. If I raise something here which is not getting clear as we move along, you need to just ask, and we'll come to it. Everybody raised their hand? No. Dora.
Michael, was karma the third scope? Or what? I didn't quite get the third. I'm not sure what the third scope
Or was it?
Oh, the third scope.
Yeah.
The third scope. The third scope is trying to remember which metaphor he used, and I can't remember, but it has to do with as a result of following in order the previous two scopes, you then continue, in this case, with the path of the 7-point mind training, and you come to the place where the scope is the unmitigated wish to benefit all sentient beings. Now, personally, I think there's a piece in there which you could say the reason that you would come to that place is because you actually saw, along with everything else, that when you really held the view of wishing, aspiring to benefit all sentient beings, you felt good about that. Not that you could do it, but just the aspiration felt good. Like of all the aspirations I've had in my life, this one feels like when I do it, whatever is good feels better, and whatever is not so good feels like it's helping somehow. It saves us from the unmitigated focus on the illusion of self. The practice is not only powerful in a kind of forward motion way. Along the way, it's worth noting the protections that are built into the practice to protect us from falling backwards. Or if we have like fallen backwards, then the teachings that show us how to get up and move forward. Now, there's that great saying from Suzuki Roshi. He said, just like if you're walking down the sidewalk and you fall down, like it doesn't make sense to be angry at the sidewalk. If it weren't for the sidewalk, you wouldn't be able to get up. And I think there's a lot of parallel there with our practice. We sometimes get irritated. I can't hold the view. The view vanishes. I can't do this. I just can't even want to benefit all sentient beings. They're such crumbs. And so we find ourselves in that place, and then we notice that, and then we beat ourselves up. Wrong move. So that's the falling down on the sidewalk. If you didn't notice it, you would never be able to implement the practice which repairs it. You've all read this on positive in the mind training, that the mind training practices will bear absolutely no fruit if you are devoid of attachment, devoid of aversion, devoid of fear. They will bear no fruit. They are not for you. You have to kind of be in the muck in order to implement the things that help you to get out of the muck. Why would you wear a raincoat on a hot day in the desert? You need rain in order for that to make sense. So all of the things that we work with all the time are what are necessary in order for the pieces to come together and bear their fruit. So when we think, I can't do it, I'm not worthy, I'm not good, I'm bad, this is for people who are better than I am, and you go through all of these things, this is really a mistake. It's because we have those things that the path works. If we didn't have those things, probably the Buddha never would have even appeared. So the two minds here, aspiring and engaging. The aspiring mind is clear. We aspire to accomplish this path. Engaging can be seen from a number of different perspectives, but some will say that it's stepping into a place where you actually help somebody. But I think pulling back from that slightly is a better place. We aspire first to even want to benefit others. It's not aspire to benefit others. First we have to have this sense of it's valuable, it's something good to do. And the first engagement is to engage in the practices that lead us deeper into that. Actually helping others, that's still a little ways away. So we'll cover that a little more. Practitioner having generated the two awakening minds, aspiring and engaging, cognizant of including even the tiniest precepts of these practices, these are the prerequisites. So that phrase, the tiniest precepts, is a very nice thing to put there. In other words, don't only pay attention to the big aspirations. The small aspirations are also good. Don't just pay attention to the really big vows that we take. Thou shalt not kill. That's a nice one. But most of us never get around to doing that one anyway. So all the smaller ones actually could be bearing some fruit, be beneficial. Reflect on the meaningfulness. Now he's back, you see, to this. That's what the order, sometimes you have to kind of adjust where I am, because sometimes we move. Reflect on the meaningfulness of having obtained a human existence of leisure and opportunity. I suggest you find the liturgy that sings to you and review this once a day. Just read some liturgy that points out the four thoughts that turn the mind. And try and be present with it for the 1 minute that it takes to read it. That's all. Just try and have some relationship with it. Reflect on the meaningfulness of having obtained a human existence, of leisure and opportunity. Don't get hung up on the fact that you don't have leisure. That's another problem. To prevent yourself from wasting it, think, I must practice the Dharma. Indeed. This line will carry no value whatsoever if you do not hold the unbounded view. If you hold the unbounded view, that tiny light in the distance becomes hot sun in your face. You know, it's like, I must practice the Dharma. The unbounded view makes that very important. And among Dharma practices, this mind training is the most excellent. Then reflect. Even though I may have found human existence of leisure and opportunity within my lifespan, there is no time to spare. Again, no meaning there at all without the unbounded view. It's just hot air going by otherwise. Since in future lives I must experience happiness and suffering as fruits of my virtuous and negative karma, this mind training is the most excellent virtuous activity, even for the goal of freedom from cyclic existence. That's the third cycle. You get that, right? I don't mean the third cycle. I mean the third scope. Even for the goal of freedom from cyclic existence, that's the third scope, No path is more profound than this. This training is also the supreme cause of attaining Buddhahood for the benefit of self and others. Contemplate these points. Not only, and this is a really important one, I lost my place.
Bottom of the paragraph.
I'm sorry?
The bottom of the paragraph.
Thank you so much. Contemplate these points not only when your enthusiasm for the training of mind is strong, but also when such enthusiasm is lacking. This is so important. It's really important that we be enthusiastic, because we know we can do almost anything when we're enthusiastic. As long as it lasts, we're good. And here, what we're doing is, we are training in learning how to facilitate enthusiasm. It's like you fall down on the ground and you curse, and the next thing you hear is Suzuki Roshi's voice. Don't curse the sidewalk. It's your benefactor. Now you can get up. It sounds so corny and so irrelevant that it would never occur to you, except that Suzuki Roshi was a great Zen master. So no wasted words. If there's no enthusiasm, you know how important it is. Figure out a way to get it. It's part of the mind training to be enthusiastic. Okay, we're coming to the second point. First point was the preliminaries. And we're going to go back and forth here a bit. How are we doing? Do we need a break? No? Okay. I'll act again in 3 minutes. The second point, the training in the two minds of awakening, is the main practice. It has two parts, ultimate mind and conventional mind. Now we have a very interesting sentence here. Given the sequence in which meditative equipoise, if you don't know what that is, this is a good time to ask. Meditative.
They're asking, what is it?
Who's asking?
Wonderful Kay is asking.
Meditative equipoise, equipoise really means a kind of balanced, right? So we often say that good meditation is meditative equipoise, like things are balanced. Both the body is balanced, like it's not struggling, and could even be if you're lying down, it could be in meditative equipoise. Things are balanced and kind of easy. And your meditation is not too intense, not too tight, not too loose. All of these things in balance. So he says here, given the sequence in which meditative equipoise, which is like commonly when we're practicing shamatha, following our breath or something, we would generally say, if you're doing that properly, that's meditative equipoise. So he says, given the sequence in which meditative equipoise and post-meditation stages arise within a single person, these two minds are presented here in the following order. I'm going to go over this if you're missing it. First, to train in the ultimate awakening mind, there are two parts, the actual meditation session and the subsequent period practices. So what he's talking about here is two parts, ultimate mind and conventional mind. Given the sequence in which meditative equipoise and post-meditation, which is not meditative equipoise, generally, if you can do meditative equipoise in between sessions, you're pretty good. So, it's just less equipoise at the least. Given the sequence in which meditative equipoise and the post-meditation stages arise within a single person, you're sitting in calm abiding, and then you get up. You've moved from meditative equipoise into another place. In that order. Given the sequence in which meditative equipoise and post-meditation stages arise, so the post-meditation stage means you're now carrying the practice between sessions, right? So there's just that natural order. That doesn't mean that we've given up the meditation in between, or that we're not engaging in some kind of Dharma practice in between, but the meditative equipoise has now moved to something else. And especially when we talk about the two minds of the ultimate and the conventional, it's always the case that the first thing we have to do is get in touch here with what he's going to be talking about, with the ultimate. Given the sequence in which meditative equipoise and post-meditation stages arise within a single person, these two minds are presented here in the following order. In this order, given the sequence in which they arise. First, to train in the ultimate awakening mind. First, to train an ultimate awakening mind, there are two parts. The actual meditation session and the subsequent period practices. Now, if we look at this from the perspective of an actual meditation session, which we'll do, but let's look at it from this perspective. I'm not sure what to call it, but I'll call it a standard meditation session that you might do at home would be sit down and first bring to mind the four thoughts that turn the mind. Maybe you take 10 seconds to do that, maybe you take 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. That's the first thing. Don't forget the four thoughts that turn the mind. Following that, you then settle into equipoise. Let's continue. The meditation session, did I answer your question? Okay. The meditation session is threefold. Preparatory practices, the main practice, and the concluding practice. So here we are. This is all about the preparation for the exploration of the ultimate mind. So that should be clear. Even though we're kind of going back and forth, the ultimate mind and then the relative mind, and then there's a little bit of practice and all, we're just going back and forth within the same piece of territory here. The meditation session is threefold. Preparatory practice, the main practice, and the concluding practice. Not very helpful so far. As for the preparation, undertake the 7-limb practice in your sacred space and make supplications to meditation deities and your teachers. And, having seated comfortably, I have some typos in here that I didn't completely catch last night. Having seated comfortably, you could say having seated yourself comfortably on your meditation cushion, count your breath. So now he's giving us an instruction in a shamatha or calm abiding practice. Exhalation, count your breath, exhalation and inhalation 21 times. And now he's going to tell us why you would do that. With these practices, you make your body, speech, and mind fit for meditative concentration, or you could say for meditative equipoise. It's very important to have these steps, and it's very important to engage in them, because we want to move to the place of we know exactly how we're doing this and why we're doing it, and we are used to experiencing the benefit. It's very important so that it becomes easy to do. Easy to do. You could be walking in some high-rise building downtown and stop at a window and gaze out and count 21 breaths. Standing, sitting, whatever, and prepare your mind for the practice and sit down on a bench and engage in something, some meditation practice. You will never do that if you have never practiced it or tried it. It just won't occur to you to do it. But it occurs to all of us to stop at a window and gaze for 3 minutes on a wonderful view. That view occurs every time we sit down and practice. If the practice is at all fruitful, it occurs. So why is it so difficult for us to just engage periodically in that during the day? So difficult to do. Not really difficult, easy to do. It's just easy to not do is the problem. So I think part of what Thupten Jinpa does here is we go a little ways, we go back. We review. We come forward a little more, we go back a little bit. It's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, going at it. It's actually a nice text to read over and over again. It's not a liturgy. The 7-point mind, the 7-branch prayer, the 7-limb prayer, is a liturgy. If you know it, it's a good thing to recite every time you sit down. Just like, so it's in your mind. So that's more in your mind than whether you're going to have a ham sandwich or a piece of chicken or something. It's just a way of looking at our future through the lens of what we're doing now, which is what will be our future. So now he comes to the place of, we're on the top of page 2, come down a little ways, and it says, this the Master said. Now let's go back here. Although this is true, during the preparatory stage you must relate to these phenomena that occur while you're following your breath and sitting quietly in calm abiding. During the main session, given that all of these mind training practices depend on the tradition of simultaneous engagement, you know what that is?
I was very curious about the sentence that you skipped at the very top of page 2, the one that reads, then generate as a precursor the conventional awakening mind accompanied by the beneficial qualities of meditative concentration.
That's the top of page 2?
Yeah.
Then
generate as a precursor.
Breaths,
Okay.
Generate as a precursor the conventional awakening mind, which when I read these texts it always strikes me as this is where you project your highly realized insight practice to set the ground before you engage in these other things, but maybe that's a misreading.
No, well, that's one way to view it. Body speech, generate a precursor. You know, there's our practices are full of generating precursors. Is that true? That is to say, in order for the plant to grow, a seed must have been planted. And so we are continuously trying to do that and make it more and more automatic. So this is one of those areas where generally we say a really good Buddhist would have no habitual tendencies. But remember earlier we said, if that's you, this is not for you. You don't even need to be in a cave. You're done. So this is not, it's kind of like meditative concentration will not benefit the Buddha. Why is that? Because he's so arrogant that he won't do it? Or because there's nothing to be done there? So here we have something that needs to be done. We are working with the two minds, the aspirational and the engaged mind at this point. And so he says, generate as a precursor the conventional awakening mind. Well, the conventional awakening mind is aspiration bodhicitta. You aspire to have the view to hold the benefit of all sentient beings as not only for their benefit, but that aspiration is higher than your regard for yourself. Which does not mean that you should not take care of yourself and benefit yourself. We always say benefiting self and other. If we think to ourselves, I will benefit exclusively other beings, we will not even benefit ourselves. It won't work. The pieces are like they are for a reason. And when we practice, we can see how they fit together. So the precursor is that aspiration. Just that, which we could recite from a liturgy, or we could just say it to ourselves, or we could just do it. Like, my wish is to benefit all sentient beings. I wish to attain complete and full enlightenment, free from all the causes of suffering, and to embody all the causes of happiness and realization and joy and equanimity, all of these things, in order that all beings might have those qualities. That's what makes it, that's the precursor. You just inject that into the practice. And you don't have to do it right here where he says, then generate as a precursor the conventional awakening mind, accompanied by the beneficial qualities of meditative concentration. So meditative concentration is good, but it's not extraordinarily good. Settling the mind is good because that's the ground of many great qualities. But in and of itself, the settled mind does not embody those qualities. The qualities come by virtue of the conventional awakening aspiration to benefit all sentient beings. So now we plant that seed in the settled mind, and it grows. Clear? Is that good enough? I mean, good enough is good enough.
Good enough for now.
Okay, so then generate as a precursor the conventional awakening mind, accompanied by the beneficial qualities of meditative concentration. So obviously, the meditative concentration and the wish to benefit all beings come together in this one place, and the benefit is magnified. So then he says, during the main session, given that all of these mind training practices depend on the tradition of simultaneous engagement, so I just wanted to know, you all know what that is, right?
No.
You're supposed to know this.
I'm sorry. How long?
You've been taken to task.
Okay, let me read the piece first. During the main session, given that all of these mind training practices depend upon the tradition of simultaneous engagement, so you do know something about what that means. It means more than one thing is going to happen at once, right? You should simultaneously meditate on the emptiness of all phenomena, including your own self and others. Although this is true, during the preparatory stage, you must relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner. So we're not avoiding the simultaneous engagement. It's just coming back here, but you can see what's happening. We're going to have to look at this a few times. Although this is true, that is to say, you must relate to these phenomena as you are meditating in equipoise. What's happening? Things are going on. Isn't it? That ever happened to you? Things are going on. You're having kind of random thoughts. Your body is objecting by giving you a charley horse in your thigh. And you're also remembering that you're late for lunch. And so on. All of these things are going on at the same time. Is that a problem?
We can make it one. We can make it one.
We can make it one. That's good. Yeah.
And we do.
During the main session, given that all of these mind training practices depend on the tradition of simultaneous engagement, do you see the simultaneous engagement? Now listen. You should simultaneously meditate on the emptiness of all phenomena. That's one thing. Now we can say plus, including your own self and others, the emptiness of all phenomena, including the emptiness of self and others. Although this is true, during the preparatory stage, you must relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner. You know the rule. You try to cut off your distractions, they get more. They multiply much faster than you can cut them off. So the army overruns you way before you even draw your gun, so to speak. It's like, so all of this is true. During the preparatory stage, you must relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner. Enumerating, here's the big simultaneous, enumerating each phenomenon by means of the wisdom of discriminative awareness. What does that mean? One thing you know is there's an important secret here. So you're engaging in the practice. The fruit of the practice depends upon the simultaneous engagement, that is to say, doing all of these things kind of at once. It's actually just one thing, but it can feel like it's a whole bunch of things. But fairly quickly, if you try it, you'll see it's really just one thing. Although this is true, that is to say, you should simultaneously meditate on the emptiness of all phenomena. So you may object and say, but I don't experience the emptiness of all phenomena. That's okay. Meditate on the emptiness of all phenomena. It's all right. It'll come. Including your own self and others, empty. And every once in a while you'll have an insight into this. It'll just come. It's kind of like filling in a large paint by numbers thing somehow. It gradually fills in. Including your own self and others, the emptiness of all phenomena, including your own self and others. Although this is true, that is to say, the emptiness is actually true. We can't see it yet. Although this is true, during the preparatory stage, you must relate to all of these phenomena that are coming up. The question is, how do you relate to it? In what way is that fruitful? Although this is true, during the preparatory stage, you must relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner. You can't relate to them by just throwing them out. Even Milarepa couldn't do that. So you may as well cash that one in. It's not going to happen. So, in a gradual manner, and he gives the exact instruction for doing it. In a gradual manner, enumerating each phenomenon, that is to say, each experience that arises, each thought, each physical feeling, whatever it is, some philosophical concept, whatever it is, in a gradual manner, you note it, you kind of mark it, note it. You don't have to think the word, but you could. It's better not to, but as a starter, you could think the word phenomenon. You know, Jogi and Trungpa have people do this. Name it. Name it. Name it, let it go. Names are easy to let go of. The thing itself is difficult. So if you can name it, you can let go of it easier. Although this is true, during the preparatory stage, you must relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner, enumerating each phenomena by means of the wisdom of discriminative awareness. That is to say, the discriminative awareness is you are aware that this is a phenomenon that's coming by. And you note that awareness by naming it. Like you're thinking about lunch, you can just say lunch. Lunch. You can say lunch to yourself. You don't have to say anything. But if it's helpful, you can say lunch, phenomena of lunch, hunger, anything at all. But you must relate to it. You can't just feel swamped by it and irritated. That's not going to help. Anyway, you don't need help. This is fun. See?
It's so fun.
This, the Master said, has the benefit of allowing, oh, this is so beautiful, the moisture of tranquil abiding to give birth to the shoots of realization. So the tranquil abiding with all of these phenomena occurring, and through your natural discriminative awareness, which can be nurtured further all the time, you note all of these phenomena. You note your distraction, you note your irritation, you note your physical feeling, you note all these things. And if the physical thing feels bad enough, you change your place, you note you're changing how you're sitting. It's just like you're aware of the phenomena unfolding. It's like you went to a movie, you didn't have to pay anything for it. It's not likely to scare you. What a benefit. It's just, all you got to do is just watch what happens, and you'll know partly that you'll do it, that's what you're doing, because the show is never the same twice. It's always fresh, it's always new. Next, the initial meditation on the absence of intrinsic existence of perceived objects is presented in the following line, and that's where we're going to go next. Train to view all phenomena as dreamlike. So the first thing you do, we were just talking about. Watch the phenomena arise. You count your breath 21 times. You settle into meditative equipoise. You watch the phenomena arise. Does it ever not arise? Nobody's saying anything, so...
It always arises.
It always arises. Except for one thing. There's never an it. It's just an arising. Okay? I hate to push the matter, but I think it's time for a break. So, one thing, let us follow the teaching that we're reading. Can we hand out our recitation? Do we have enough of these? People who can't? Is that our thing?
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The refuge prayer and the bodhicitta prayer.
I think 100% knows.
100% what?
Know this.
Everybody knows it?
There might be a couple people who get it.
Who needs it? Who needs the prayer? 3. We need 3.
3 in here.
Actually, you better take one more.
4. Keep your hand up if you need it.
Yeah, some of them even have an explanation on the back. Training wheels.
Oh, did you want everything?
Huh?
You want everything to have it?
Oh, no, it's not necessary.
Okay.
No. Okay, we're going to recite this, and if you don't know it and don't have it, it's okay, we'll get it on the break. So we imagine when we recite this prayer, and it's very nice to have something like this to recite, remind ourselves of it. We imagine that actually all sentient beings are in front of us, arrayed like a vast cloud extending forever. And we imagine that by virtue of our connection with all of these beings, as all of them having been our mothers, our fathers, our brothers and sisters, and infinite relationships, that when we sit down to recite it, we also hold the aspiration that it will benefit all beings, and that's included in the prayer. So it's just another opportunity to cast seeds into the fertile ground of our mind. Oh, until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. So I think we're probably going to have to take 15 minutes with this many people. For those of you who are not aware, there's a bathroom upstairs just to the right of the top of the stairs, and there's a downstairs right across the hallway here, and at the bottom to the right of that place there's a restroom. And there's also a restroom in the back of the kitchen. And I know there's hot water urns and things you can make a cup of tea with. I'm not sure there's enough cups or enough water, but you can try it. Oh, there is.
3 pints. 100 cups.
It's not enough.